This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It is 10:08 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast. You're on Ask a Rabbi.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Loeb of Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. And we are definitely getting closer and closer to the High Holy Day season. Today is the 8th of Elul, the Hebrew month preceding the month of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah, according to scriptures, starts on the first day of the 7th month of the year.
Okay.
And so it is, people think of it as New Year, and we do change the calendar year. I'm not sure when we started. I'm not sure when we started with calendars, number one. And number two, I'm not sure when we started actually changing the date. It's interesting that historically, the years of a reign of a king were used to measure. So they would say something like, in the 14th year of so-and-so's reign. And those years changed in Nisan, which is around the festival of Passover. It's 2 weeks before Passover is on the 15th of Nisan. So
Okay.
the eve of the 14th.
I wonder who invented the calendar. That was a genius move.
Yes and no. But you're right. It's a human invention.
Uh-huh.
It very much so. And in fact, the whole measuring of time is somewhat arbitrary because, let's figure this out, folks, 365 and kind of a quarter of the day
Yes.
make a year. So you can't break that up into 24-hour days because you've got this extra piece hung out there. And the reality is that each day, this sidereal day, the day when the same part of the earth gets to the same part of the sun, changes.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, because we wobble, but also because it has to be less than 24 hours.
There you go. Yeah. Well, you think about it, and I just kind of laugh thinking, I'll bet Hallmark invented that too.
Well, Hallmark certainly invented the idea of giving cards. And that's an interesting sidebar because the very first recorded cards, if you will, were cards that Jews sent to other Jews wishing them a Happy New Year. So they would go out at this time of year.
Yeah.
The early ones were postcards, very pretty printed postcards that were mailed back and forth just to wish people a Happy New Year.
Nice.
And that grew into the greeting card industry, where people started to remember other things. And then we have, Sweetest Day and other things that were kind of created to send out greeting cards.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool.
We can thank Hallmark, American Greeting, all of those companies that make their money printing out cards. And
Well, we didn't have to wait for a card. Got it on my phone.
electronic now, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that because that's going to put that industry, it's going to be another one of those industries that's going to go by
just
the wayside.
goes away.
But
Yeah.
certainly not going to be as common because people are not mailing stuff as much. And,
Yeah. Our granddaughter got engaged on the beach in Southern California. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Very cool.
Very nice.
Yep.
That's a beautiful scene. And
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and it's,
Sunset on the beach doesn't get any better than that.
no, somebody wanted a photo op.
Well, and I was thinking back to this is a long way back, 50 years, when Carol and I were walking across the Golden Gate Bridge.
Wow.
And that's where I proposed, right in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if she said no, never mind.
That's right. Off she goes over the side. No. Oh.
Didn't say that.
Yeah. But, yeah, that's very interesting about the greeting card industry. You think that a lot of them can kind of retool and reinvent themselves, but
I
just
hope
don't
they
know.
do. I hope they do. Well, I think a lot of things are changing, and I say this as somebody who loves to watercolor, and I'm about to start acrylic pouring because I happen to think those paintings are just gorgeous.
Wow.
But yeah, I've got to figure
Is
out.
there anything you don't do?
Yeah, find time to do the things I want to. So I have a very busy schedule. To be real, we don't have children. We have fur babies, so they're a little bit easier.
Yeah, but
Little
they keep
less
you
time.
busy,
They
though.
definitely do keep me busy, and we do our walkies.
Mm-hmm.
Shadow and Imp and I do walkies
Mm-hmm.
most nights, not every night. Thank you, Rain, but nights or depending on the weather. This time of year, it's hard to do it during the day because they look at me about halfway through and go, "Huh, you got to be kidding."
Yeah. Where are we living?
Yeah.
Yes.
How come you can't bring the air conditioner with you, Mom?
That's right, yeah.
So
Couldn't you get a post in Alaska or something? No.
then they'd cry about the cold.
That's yeah, I was going to say. That's
Yeah.
yeah. It's like,
Yeah, I don't do anywhere near as well with that kind of cold.
well, you grew up in that.
Yeah.
Good grief, yeah.
I mean, I was in California for a good part of it. Learned that I like to not have snow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one part of California. In most parts, that is, if you're not in the mountains. Yeah. But yeah, you in the Pittsburgh area and Ohio, oh my goodness, you had winters.
Oh yeah.
You had winters.
Oh yeah. And and I can remember going to the hospital when I was a chaplain in third degree emergency weather because you go to the hospital to be with people to help them,
That's right.
and you wait for the ambulances to try to arrive safely. And
That's got to be so awful. Yeah, I remember just the year and a half or so that Carol was in Boston, and she got locked out of her car because the
Froze.
locks were frozen.
yeah.
One of the photographers, thank goodness, opened it up for her. And yeah, it's real. It's a challenge.
I don't miss locks freezing. We used to when we motorhomed, and we motorhomed sometimes in the winter too. And we had a great big dog dryer. We still have the great big dog dryer because it dries dogs. But we used to put that on the locks to open them.
Oh wow!
Because
Really?
they would heat up the mechanism and melt the water.
Yeah. Okay. Makes
Yeah, you needed that because you sometimes had to get out of the motorhome.
Yeah. Well, we had
Like when the dogs were looking at you and going, "Mom."
we were at a playoff football game. This is early on in ESPN, and at the time of the 3/4 inch tape decks were freezing, and I would have to run the tape decks down to the NBC Sports trucks where they had hair dryers.
Mm-hmm.
A set of hair dryers that would dry this stuff and warm it up, and then you run it back up on the roof. And oh yeah, it was it was terrible.
But I'm going to take from that a bigger thing, which is that no matter what life throws at us, the key is to find a way to cope.
Oh yeah,
The key is the coping mechanisms, the problem solving, the solution finding that doesn't hurt anybody.
and our truckies at ESPN, there were some of them that did so many events during a year that they were only home
Yeah.
2 weeks a year, and they were just ingenious in problem solving.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's. I think there's just there's a lifestyle, if you will, that has to do with what do I learn from the situation. That's a question that I always try to ask when something that I don't like happens, and we're all filled with stuff in our lives that is tragic, that is harmful, that is whatever. And if it's not something for which you say thank you, then the question becomes, what do I learn from it? And how do I make my and other lives better because of that?
Mm-hmm.
That's a life view, if you will. It's a way of looking at things. Because the object is not to sit there yes, you're occasionally going to have a pity party because we're human, but the pity party doesn't help. It just doesn't help. It doesn't help you, and it doesn't help anybody else.
Right.
And the what can I do with it is a way to look at that. And I've talked about it other times. I've talked about something called the right questions. It's not R-I-G-H-T, but W-R-I-G-H-T. And I forget Mr. Wright's first name. But he came up with a set of questions. And these are helpful questions when you're dealing with anything, almost anything. And the first question is, what's right with the current situation? What's going on in this situation, this scenario, that's right? What's the good? What's the silver lining in this scenario, in this event? Once you do that, then you move from there and you say, what would be an ideal outcome of the current scenario? What do I really want to happen out of this? And then the third question is, what's the gap between what's happening right now and what could happen? And then...
Makes sense?
Yeah. And then the next questions are, what can we do about it? Right? How do we move ourselves toward that ideal? It's a way of looking at things that helps you put it in perspective. What's right? What would be ideal? What's the gap? And then breaking it down into steps of how to get there. Recognizing you might not jump from where you are now to the end. So if I say, let's look at my licensing as something, maybe it's got me down that I've got another year or so, and actually like 2 years by the time I finish all the paperwork for Florida, thank you. But classwork's another year. And I could sit here and I could cry about how much more work there is and everything else associated with it. Or I could say, hey, I can learn this while I'm on the way. I can do this, I can do that. So that I can look at the things that I can use from it. What can I do to make it easier, better? Well, I can work a little bit ahead instead of always being behind the 8 ball. And so, yeah, those are the kinds of things. That way, when life does throw you a curve, it only knocks you back to on time instead of having to make up.
I still have such a hard time believing that you've got a doctorate in something and the state makes you come back and get a master's.
Well, they don't make me, but it's the easier way.
Yeah. Well, that's the key. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a looking at and weighing options. How do I go from where I am to where I want to go? And it's not others make other choices and they go the other route. There's a number of different routes to it. Here's the interesting piece. So this is a little bit about counseling. Each state does it differently. It's not like medical doctors where there's a universal or a state or country-wide set of certifications so that if you're certified in Florida, you can go to California or vice versa. With counselors, that's not true. Each state regulates it differently. Each one has different numbers of hours, different kinds of coursework. They're trying to get it standardized in order to increase what's called portability, so that if you have a license, you can move somewhere with it because
exactly
life does that. And there is something coming called the Compact. The Compact is a group of states who are in the process of getting together and finding a common certification so that it is more transportable.
You should have done that years ago.
Yeah, they should have. But there are just a number of states have backed into it. I think that had to do with people not taking mental health as seriously as it needs to be taken. And it's it's similar in many ways to spiritual. When I was a chaplain in Akron, at Akron General, it was taken very seriously. We were considered part of the medical team. And here in Port St. Lucie, I can't speak for all of Florida, but here in Port St. Lucie, we're an afterthought. If the patient wants it and requests it, then you can go in and talk to them.
Oh.
Which is a whole different thing.
It's a 180.
Well, it is, because in Akron, what we would do is we would stop in and we would talk to the patient. I mean, they had the right to not talk to us, of course, because they have the right to refuse any particular service. But we would actually write on their chart a spiritual assessment of where they were spiritually. And that helps the medical team. It's a piece of information. So if somebody doesn't think they're going to live, that's important. If they think that God's angry at them, that's important. It's going to affect the surgery. It is a part of the psychological picture of the patient, and those are important things. And if the patient's convinced they're not going to survive the surgery, it's going to be a lot harder to convince a good surgeon to do the surgery, because they know that the attitude of the patient has a big impact.
And the rehab is the name of the game.
Absolutely.
And a lot of that is mental.
Yeah. You have to want to push your body. That's part of it. Because it's not easy. It's not easy. And everybody's body is different. So some people feel pain differently than others.
Everybody's pain tolerance is different.
The tolerance is different, and what hurts is different. Right? So, for example, somebody might be able to tolerate tooth pain really well, but not a hangnail. Right? Or not a crushed toe, or whatever. There's all different kinds of things. Stomach aches, any number of ailments that some people just gloss over and keep going and don't even pay attention to, and others collapse on the floor.
It's funny you mentioned the toes. NFL friend of mine who ended his NFL career because he had turf toe, they call it. And this turned into a major problem with his foot, and he had to retire.
Yeah,
and he was fine once he left football. But it was that repetition that just was just intolerable pain-wise.
Yeah. Well, carpal tunnel.
That too. Oh, yeah.
Right. Certain professions tend towards certain kinds of repetitive injuries.
And I want to see, in maybe, 10 years down the road, with the young people, and, the way they handle their phones, what's going to happen to their thumbs?
Not so much worried about that as I am their posture.
Oh, well, that's...
Right, because they're bending over to look at the phone.
That's
they're not
right.
sitting it up. And so there's actually a couple of different exercises that you can do to improve the posture, which is, rolling the shoulders back, setting... I should do that too, because I'm crouched over the microphone. So there's a number of things that we can do to help ourselves in a variety of different ways. And some would argue that to the extent to which we can, we are responsible to do it. And that's a key thing. I'll tell you a couple of things that concern me with the upcoming generation. Not only is there the constant bending of our heads, which is not the way our spines are currently designed, and hopefully they won't come that way, because it's going to be harder to look forward if you're looking down, which is part of the problem in the car, folks. If you're trying to play the game while you're driving down the road, not a good idea. The other thing that's happening, and this is probably a little more significant, is parents who are on the phone and not paying attention to their kids.
Oh, yeah.
And
set them in front of a tablet.
Right. Well, there's the combination of putting the kid on the electronics, and then we have screen kids, but there's also the neglect. The parent may be physically there, but they're not accessible. Same is true when the parent is working from home. It sends kind of a mixed signal to the child because you're physically there, but I can't get your eye contact. And we know when we have eye contact. We know when somebody's looking us in the eye. There's, in our brains, there's something that clicks when we look at each other. That's different from looking at the face. When you look eye to eye, it's different. There's a kind of a communication that link that starts between, and that is missing when the parent is on the tablet or the phone or the computer. And that is a form of neglect. And neglected children are traumatized over and over and over again. So if your kid comes to the opinion that you're not there, even if you're physically there, alcoholics or drug addicts that are passed out are the same. They're physically in the room, but they're not there.
Sure.
And those things lead to certain challenges in the children as they're growing up. They don't learn to feel secure. They become much more anxious. They have anxiety issues, and some of those never leave. We have a feral cat. She's sweet. She's cute. She is the daughter of a feral cat who was pregnant and brought in during COVID. Actually, she's our COVID baby. But she was part of the SNP program, and what SNP, where they bring feral cats in, they neuter them and release them.
Oh, okay.
So that they keep whatever population they're controlling in check, but they don't make 5 million babies while they're at it.
I never heard of that.
That's called SNP. And the reason it's called SNP is because they put a little snip in the ear so that you can tell, so they don't recapture the same cat. Helpful. And so her mother was pregnant when she was picked up for that. And the babies were born in this woman's house. And they weren't properly socialized. And I wasn't paying enough attention at the time. But the woman said that their mom kind of discarded them at 4 or 5 weeks. A little early. They're still really nursing. And that she would have nothing to do with them, so they took her and released her. So these kittens didn't have a parent. And apparently the human didn't step in and socialize them quite right either. So she is not trusting.
Oh.
She has a lot of trouble. She has a lot of issues associated with trust. And she won't let you pick her up. She'll come to you, and she'll let you pet her, but you can't pick her up, which hopefully will eventually cure, but we may not. That may be so ingrained in her from a lack of attachment as a child. Mom's not available. And it doesn't have to be mom. It has to be preferably an adult, but it can also be a sibling. So I was thinking about that also.
See, I never thought about that in the animal world.
They have it too. They are more anxious when they don't have a good upbringing. That's why we tell people don't get your puppies or your kitties too young, because they need that socialization with their sibs and with their parents. They need it. They need that attachment, healthy attachment as well growing up, and it's going to affect whether or not they've got anxieties. So if you pick up your baby too young, the odds are that you've messed up its attachment development.
We had a beautiful Labrador in San Diego, and she had pups, and she had 9. And
small house.
Carol and I had to feed the 9th one.
Because she only had 8.
Which was the real runt of the bunch. And it obviously, as we found out later, not healthy. But the mom knew it.
Yeah. They often do. And when you push it, sometimes you end up having to deal with the issues. It may not be a viable puppy.
And it wasn't.
Yeah.
It lasted, we were bottle feeding it and stuff. It only lasted a few days.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens, and they have an instinctive. If the baby's not strong enough to fight with its sibs to do the competition to get to the nipples, there is probably something wrong. Not always, but probably. And you don't know whether it was a defect in the puppy, whether it was a hard birth. There's many things that contribute to it. Unless you do a really good exam, you don't know. From raising the dogs, how do you keep all the puppies alive and healthy?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there's one that's just not destined to survive, and it's tragic and heart rendering.
It's tough. Yeah.
But getting back to our kids growing up today, the combination of the increase in availability of drugs and alcohol and parents who overindulge in the evening, even if they go to work and they're reliable otherwise, but if they're not emotionally available to the child, that child is neglected. And that's a hard one, because it's also not healthy to go in and break that up and throw the kid in the system.
Mm-hmm.
That's not healthy either. That eliminates some of the healthy attachment. So there's many issues. We learned some of that particularly in Romania, with the orphanages, that kids did a whole bunch of stuff, and it's surprising how much adults can remember feeling alone as an infant or as a small child. Those feelings harm the self-confidence and things like that. So it really is a big issue.
That's funny. We talk every once in a while to our son, who remembers back to, he can remember a short time after birth. And it shocks me.
Yeah.
But it's how in the world do you remember that? Yeah.
Oh, you'd be surprised what people can remember.
Yeah. But the one thing you mentioned about the screen kids, when we were having our Bone Talk show, and Dr. Joe was talking about the new sports injury, if you will, with kids, is going to be the upper neck.
Does it?
Kind of a hook
Mm-hmm.
that's developing now because they are looking down.
They're
so
looking
much.
down too much, yeah.
Yeah.
So, there's a benefit in having stuff at eye level. The other thing that people are looking down at is their laptop computers.
Oh, sure. Even desktop computers. Sometimes.
Unless you elevate.
Yeah.
Right. I have mine in a position where I have to look a little bit up. So it encourages me to sit back. Yeah, studio, they're slightly up,
yeah,
as they should be. And even my little rigmarole right here is pretty much at eye level. And it's not as high as I might like, but you know that I've always looked for a support to bring it up closer to eye.
Sure.
I just understand that. It's important to... I don't have a whole lot of height to me, so I need to stay straight.
You and me both.
But, we're going to pay the price for all of these things down the road if we don't start to do something when people are young. We think that kids don't remember, but they do. They particularly remember the pain. We have a great ability in our minds to remember pain and to forget other pains, to block them.
That's intriguing.
Mm-hmm. Some pains we hold on to, and some we just hold on to the feeling. We don't really remember what caused the pain. We tend to hold on to emotions.
Oh, yeah.
And trauma is an interesting thing. Trauma affects... one of these years, Dr. Strahan will come in with me here and do a show with me. But one of her favorite comments is that life is traumatic. We have tons and tons of things that happen to us over and over again that are traumatic. And the question is, do we rebound? Do we heal ourselves? And that's why a big part of the hope, strength, and healing, help for the wounded soul, is about developing resiliency. It's not we used to think a lot of things. We used to think that people were not nearly as able to continue to grow or to heal. And We're learning that people are amazingly resilient, and you can make yourself more resilient. You can intentionally build those skills, and or you can get some help from practitioners. There's something called EMDR that I am looking to get certified in. I'm not. And that is it actually shifts part of how your brain is wired. And it's done with sound and with light. And
wow. Okay.
it changes the way that your brain fires so that some of the associations become more gentle. And that's working quite well with trauma healing. So I'm looking at a number of those different modalities and skills as I go along my path toward licensure. So I'm definitely learning new things, and I'm seeking new ways of learning things. Because
Can you turn me into Einstein?
I can't do that. He's dead. But you can improve your mental acuity if you choose to.
Oh, that's true. You bet.
You can build all kinds of skills. The brain is a reservoir of what we choose to put in it.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
We may not control whether or not we're in the path of a hurricane, although obviously you can choose to evacuate or not evacuate. We can't choose whether or not this or that experience happens to us, but we certainly have input and certain amount of control over what we do in response to that event. We have much more control over the rest of our lives if we choose to exercise it. But that's the optimum piece. Do we choose to exercise it? Are you in the driver's seat of your life, or are you in the back seat snoozing? Are you a passenger? Are you just watching it go by? And I can remember in the car accident that I was in, the one where the trailer started fishtailing behind me, and I can remember the conscious thought as the car drifted off the road, which I'm sure happened very fast, and time was in whatever weird aberration time is when you have those things. I remember thinking, well, I guess I'm a passenger in this car now, because it wasn't responding to my inputs. The trailer had enough weight that it was in control of the van, which was mostly empty. So it was not a good dynamic situation once it had started fishtailing. And
would you hit black ice?
No. That was that was the tread of a tire flying off the tire and hitting the side of the trailer on its path away from the car, and that started an oscillation that just happened to apparently hit its natural frequency, and then it really started to fishtail.
Wait a minute. A tire engineer had a weird tire event?
Had an experimental tire flip and so the car rolled over into the. Thank God there weren't other cars. It was only me.
Yeah.
It was a one car off the road, and when it came to rest, it was upside down.
Oh, brother!
And shortly after it came to rest, there was a woman who came to the window, and she's like yelling at me to get out of the car because it's going to explode. And I'm like, ma'am, the engine's up there. There's no way for the gas, which is going down to the ground, to get to the hot engine. It's just not going to be a problem. Just give it a minute here. The engine's off. It's cooling off already, and the gas is going down the other direction. So I knew where I was. I knew what had happened, and it was like I had dogs in there with me. And I'm like, I need to find all the dogs. There were 3. And I need to have people hold them. I'm not getting out of this car until I know my 3 dogs are held securely by somebody.
You did go to the hospital, I hope.
I did not.
Really?
Yeah, the ER, the ambulance came, and they took my blood pressure, which of course was high.
Yeah.
And
you think?
Yeah. And they did the eye tracking thing, and they decided that I didn't have a major I knew I'd hit my head, but I didn't have a concussion. And my Bill was in the motorhome ahead of me. He had to go to an exit, come back around, and secure the dogs. And then we went and rented a truck and unpacked to the car. And yeah, we were en route to a dog show, and we didn't get to the dog show until like 10, 11 at night. We were supposed to get there right before dinner.
Right.
So that was, yeah, we had to unload everything that was in the van, and then they towed the van away, and yeah, it was a mess. It was a very full day, and I was not sleepy. The adrenaline shot from all of that kept me up for quite a while.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it took me a while to even wind down when we got home. But I didn't relive the accident. I don't relive the accident. I know what happened. And it was a matter of I survived, the dogs all survived, and yeah, we go from there. And I've
Put
been
them all in the motorhome and
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah. So, and I miss that van. It was a great van. It was a van that I had designed with, it was a Chevy. And I had designed it with the Chevy dealer to be very comfortable up in the front and very cargo in the back.
Okay.
So that the booth could go in it. And, yeah, it was a very comfortable little van. And Bill and I had built a platform in the back of it so that we could put a conduit underneath. That we used to sell canopies made out of conduit.
Oh.
And so the pipe went underneath and the fittings went into bins on top. And then dog beds and stuff like that. So, yeah, we had to unload all of that stuff. And that's just part of what it was. It wasn't a big show that we were going to, so we didn't have tons and tons of stuff.
Now, where did this happen?
This happened just, maybe a half hour to an hour outside of Canton.
Oh.
We had just left for a show, I think in Indiana, I want to say. I'm pretty sure it was Indiana. So, yeah, we had to get permission to unload, to get into the facility, to at least unload the booth, and then we got up really early in the morning and set it up.
Right.
So that we could have the booth.
Wow.
Again, you do what you have to do. And it was a crazy time of our lives, but we had fun. But neither Bill nor I want to go back to that. It was fun while we did it, and we got to see great amounts of the eastern half of the U.S. We traveled most weekends, and we camped in New York at campgrounds. Because very often the dog show would be on the campgrounds. And
So did you do New England at all?
we didn't get up into New England.
Oh.
We did New York. We did parts of New York. We did Pennsylvania. I don't think we ever did New Jersey. And then all the way down to Florida. We would come down to Florida for the January. There's a big circuit in northern Florida that goes across to Tampa and Orlando, that area, Maitland and DeLand.
Mm-hmm.
And we would do that. And we would very often take a day at Disney because it was so close.
Sure.
So we did that. And we would do shows in Virginia. We would do shows in and around the D.C. area, Maryland. So we did quite a bit of traveling. And, yeah.
Yeah, some friends of ours are up in New Hampshire, and they were telling us how beautiful it is this time of year. And it is.
Oh, yeah, because the trees are starting to turn.
Yeah.
That of all the things that happened up north, the one that I miss the most is the fall colors.
Yes. Yeah.
I miss the fall colors.
I was only back at ESPN for, 2 falls. And I had never seen him growing up in Southern California. I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard people talking about it.
You don't realize how gorgeous it is to come around to Bend in the hills.
Vermont, New Hampshire,
Even Pennsylvania.
Maine. Yeah.
Pennsylvania, exquisite. We used to love the fall shows that we would travel to. And we would travel to them all over Pennsylvania, West Virginia, a couple of good shows in West Virginia, all through that area.
Well, even
And it's spectacular.
Pennsylvania by State College, which is almost like
Mhm.
the moon. It's in the middle of nowhere.
Don't tell the students that.
I know. It's a great school, too. But, yeah.
Yeah. In State College, Pennsylvania.
State College, Pennsylvania, yep.
Yeah. Yeah. There are some great schools up in the area. Some great schools all over.
Well, where you went to college,
Ursinus?
a bunch of great colleges in that town.
Yeah, in and around Philadelphia.
It's kind of like Boston. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
it's, I forget, Carol did a story at WBZ one day on how Boston's population swells by 1.25 million each fall.
When the students
When
come
the
in.
students come back to all of the area colleges in the area.
Yeah, college towns definitely change during the semesters and get very quiet between classes. And there's a certain rhythm to that that's kind of cool. And at Florida does the opposite, right? We grow when when the colleges are out.
That's true.
Yeah, we've got all the summer or spring break and all that stuff. Yeah. Speaking of which, new terms, new semester starts Monday at Kaiser.
Oh, okay.
So, we've got 2 classes starting Monday, and one starts Monday, one starts Tuesday, and then I have I'm doing 2 online and 2 face-to-face at IRSC.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, IRSC started last week,
Yeah.
right?
IRSC has
Yep.
already I've had my second class with the
Mhm.
students. So they actually will end about a week earlier than Kaiser because everybody's just on this
Staggered a little
staggered a little bit. I started a new class this week at Liberty. So they started the 21st. And yeah, I have finished, thank you, the whole first week of homework, and they give you access to the class about, I want to say it was like Thursday or Friday of last week, where you could look at you couldn't do anything in it, but you could look at it. So I could see what chapters to read in the textbook. I could,
Okay.
I could do some things and get myself ready. And by doing that, I was able to get all of my homework turned in. The only thing I've got left is class attendance, which is I'm in a class that meets Sunday nights. So that's the only thing left.
So how much interaction do you really have on the web with your profs?
With my profs, well, the one that's quote unquote synchronous, right, which is one it's got a. They don't use Zoom. They use something called WebEx, which is very much like
very
Zoom.
similar. Yeah.
And so that we meet for 2 hours once a week. So there, everybody's there and everybody's talking, and that's like it was during COVID.
Mhm.
It's all on
Gotcha.
a screen, and I sit at my desk and do that. And the other ones, it's mostly in discussions, so you're writing back and forth. And the discussion format is pretty much standard across all of the colleges and universities where I either teach or study. And in general, it is, here's the question, you answer it, then you have access to what everybody else says, and you respond to 1, 2, or 3 students. And that'll vary from class and college. So Liberty typically has either 1 or 2. On my online, I usually require 2. It's pretty standard. And University of the People, where I also am an online professor, they require 3 responses. So you get to know people by how and what they write, what their scholarship level is. University of the People's kind of an interesting program in that there's a lot of peer grading so that your fellow students grade you.
Whoa.
And
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and part of it is learning to not be harsh in your grading. Because if you're too harsh, then you put somebody in such a hole that they can't get out. And that's not the object. The object is to learn from things. So you don't give somebody a free ride, but you also don't overly penalize them. And I think that's also something that professors need to learn as they start out. That you have to hit the level that reflects what somebody's doing, but not too much, not more than is warranted. Because when you over penalize somebody, you take away their motivation to even try. If you make the hole so deep, right, if you flunk the first test, it's really hard to recover.
That actually happens a lot in sports.
Well, and with anything, right? If you win or lose in the beginning, very often affects how it's going to go, whether or not you stay in something. It's just, it's a huge piece of it. And how to design a class so that students have early success is important. That's a class design technique. So you have to put in exercises where they've got a chance. What I do is I do practice exams for students.
Okay.
So they're exam type questions, but they can do it over and over again until they earn a perfect score. So they've got the potential of starting the class with a perfect score. And that acts as a kind of an anchor at the high end. And hopefully they've learned. And yes, I know that there's all kinds of stuff out there like Quizlet and Course Hero and Chegg and all of those programs that every student knows a whole bunch of.
Backwards and forwards.
Backwards and forwards. But the point of it is to use it to learn. Because when you do that, you do two things. One, you have that high score to work with to anchor you. Mm-hmm. And then if you get a bad score, it's not the only score on your record.
Gotcha.
And I do that for every exam. I have 1 or 2 practice exams before an exam. So people can practice and get ready and know what the questions, they may not know the exact questions, but they'll know what kind of questions they are. And then there's a variety of different things you can do beyond that. But that way students have something heading in where it helps temper the harshness of a low grade and keeps the motivation up. At least that's been my experience. I think without that, there'd be a lot more students dropping out of class. Although I bumped into a student, I was returning something, and I stepped into the UPS store. And I'm walking up to take my return to the counter, and the woman looks at me and she says, "You teach at IRSC." I had you in my class. You were my professor. And so we talked for a few minutes, and she said, "Yeah, that was one of the hardest courses I had to take." So it's not that,
Did she get a good grade?
She probably did. Most of my students do get a good grade. Most of them earn A's, but they earn them. Mm-hmm. And those who think that they're going to come in and just get it, no, that's not how it's going to work. You will flunk out. Yeah.
You got to work for it.
You do.
Yeah, for everything in life.
I tell them that at the beginning of the class. It's actually my very first class. You will get the grade you earn. You earn it by either doing a lot of work, not so well, doing a smaller amount, really well, but make sure you do enough of either that you're going to hit, because I do it by points. I don't do it by averages. It's just easier. Mm-hmm. And, when you hit 900 points, then you've done enough work, whether you've had to do a whole lot of stuff less well, or you've done really well on a few things and really earned the points. So, and I don't care which way a person gets there. Either way, they've done an amount of work.
Sure.
They've learned something. And that's the other thing that I hear from students when I bump into them years later. Is I really learned things in that class. It changed the way I think. And that's what the class is about. And that's even true with the psychology. Okay. In the psychology class, the intro to psychology, we don't expect you to come out of there and be a therapist. We don't expect you to come out of there and be a research psychologist. But we do expect that you learn a little bit about human nature and human behavior and learn when to question yourself and to learn a little bit more about how your brain works so that you can be a better student, a better mother, a better father, a better whatever. And you can be hopefully a little happier in life It's life skills, and the subject matter just facilitates those lessons rather than anything else.
All right, let's do a commercial for the
Let's
book.
The book.
The
Okay.
book. Come on. Let's
Hope,
get
Strength, and Healing for the Wounded Soul. A book about how to help yourself or others when you've experienced trauma. And trauma is anything that is violent or harmful or anything like that puts your system into a shock or into an overload situation. Some people naturally recover from those things. There are what we call acute traumas, which is right after you see it. And then there are long-term or chronic traumas, like being ignored by your parents. Those are things that you can heal from. And hopefully you'll get some things if you read that book. It's available on Amazon, available in book or Kindle right now, and we're working on the Audible. That's one of those things I've got to find some of that round 2 at time.
Oh, boy.
So,
awesome. That is awesome. That's
so
good.
do those things. And if you're interested in the High Holy Days in Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, please go to the website, www.eitzchayim.org, and register for your seat. We don't tell you how much a donation is, but it would be nice if you make a nice one. That you can do that through Venmo, Cash App, or a check.
You take Venmo.
We take Venmo. The temple has a Venmo account. It takes Venmo and
I've
Cash
never
App.
done that. I've never done
Oh,
that.
Venmo's. I like Venmo.
Do you really?
Yeah. There's just something nice about having that. It's a small account. You link it to your credit cards or to your checking account.
Right.
And you control it. So it's kind of cool.
Okay.
Anyway, Friday nights at 7:30 at 295 Northwest Prima Vista Boulevard, Northeast Prima Vista Boulevard, a corner of Irving at the Community Center of St. Andrew's Lutheran Church. Friday nights at 7:30, and the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur schedules are up on the website or on Facebook. It's a Facebook event.
Wow. All right.
So wishing everybody a great week, and God willing, see you here next week for another episode of Ask a Rabbi. This is Rabbi Shafir Loeb for Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast.
You've been listening to Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL, Port St. Lucie. Talk of the Treasure Coast, webcaster to the world.